Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Present Show.
So today we have Scott with us. Scott has a very cool title and profession.
So I am Scott Crabtree, Chief Happiness Officer, because I get to call myself whatever I want, Chief Happiness Officer of Happy Brain Science. While I was at Intel, I discovered that there was a real solid peer-reviewed science of happiness. Work done by respected professors indicating choices we could make to make ourselves happier, and that if we did make those choices, our brains would fundamentally work better in most situations. So it's not universally true. Happiness does not solve everything. But for most of us, most of the time, we will do better work, make better decisions, and even be better people when we are happier. And so about 7.5 years ago, I quit Intel and founded Happy Brain Science, where we teach the science of happiness and thriving at work, which includes a lot of things, including mindfulness.
How do you measure then your success as Chief Happiness Officer?
By people telling me that I've made a positive difference in their lives. Call my company Happy Brain Science. I'm trying to offer people as little of my opinion as possible and as much information grounded on science and data as possible. So I have to get good data. And so I have a happiness test. I have the ability to measure people's happiness before I work with them, and then I can get them to come back later and measure their happiness again. And scientists agree that measuring happiness is not perfect with a self-reporting questionnaire, but it is valid and useful and dependable.
Is there a simple definition of happiness?
Scientists don't like the word happiness because it's too fuzzy. So they typically use a phrase like subjective well-being. Subjective well-being gets at a couple of things. First of all, we are talking about self-reports of happiness. So if we ask you questions about how happy you are, that's usually how scientists are measuring happiness. There are independent measurements of brain activity that can gauge happiness as well. We have a very happy spot in our brain, which is the left side of our prefrontal cortex. Even if you give an infant something to suck, the left part of the prefrontal cortex lights up. So if you take those self-reports of happiness and those independent measurements of brain activity, again, it's not perfect, but there's a strong enough correlation. And then well-being gets at the fact that we are talking about positive emotions are wonderful and short-lived, right? Something good happens to us, our mood goes up, and then it comes back down to a happiness set point that we each have that differs from person to person. We're also talking about a longer lasting sense of meaning and satisfaction in life. I create a podcast that helps boost mindfulness in the world, and that boosts well-being in the world, and that makes the world a better place. Whatever it is that brings satisfaction and meaning to your life, we mean all of that when we say subjective well-being. I happen to use the word happiness, but I don't care what we call it as long as we know we're talking about positive emotions plus a lasting sense of well-being, meaning, and satisfaction with life.
How much this is connected with the acceptance part?
A lot of it has to do with mindset and acceptance and more. In any moment, there are children dying of hunger, but there are also beautiful smiles on children and blue skies and clouds and trees and all these wonderful things. We boost our happiness by accepting things the way they are and not trying to change everything at once. And science has found those who are in the present are happier than those who spend too much time in the past or the future. Happy to be right here, right now on the Present Show with you two. Thank you very much. It's a good moment for me. And the more we're in this moment and accepting what's in front of us, the happier we tend to be. I could argue very effectively and with lots of data and science, happiness is about accepting all of life the way it is and living in the present moment. And I could successfully argue to you with a lot of data and science, happiness is about having clear goals and working hard to create a better future. And they're both true and they fight against each other, right? So there's no simple answer, but the data would indicate it's more about acceptance.
But is it about being happy or is it about feeling happiness?
People say, I want to be happy. What I tell those people is, you want to choose happy. A lot of it's coming from between our ears and how we view our current situation and how we view the world. But it's really an ongoing process of repeatedly making the right choices. For you and your listeners, choosing to meditate is a fantastic choice if you want to be happier. But when we meditate, we get happier, right? We feel more relaxed. We're more accepting of life as it is. We're more in the present moment. Depending on what style of your meditation you're doing, maybe you're even feeling more loving kindness towards other people. It's a wonderfully happy activity. But choosing to eat fruits and vegetables also affects your happiness. Physical exercise is as effective as antidepressants in treating moderate depression in the long run. Is happiness a destination? Is it a process? Is it a choice?
Mm-hmm.
It's all of that, but it comes from choices we make every day. I want to guide you to making better choices so that you can, quote, be happy. But it's really do happy or choose happy.
Since we are really champions in self-deception as human beings, is it true that it's enough to fake a smile to feel happier and then to be like contagious with people around us?
It is true. And yes, we are very good at deluding ourselves. But there's an interesting distinction here, Lele. Again, really good questions. So when bad things happen to us, we are able to construct happiness out of whatever happened. There's a big difference between synthetic and not real. If you make yourself happier by smiling or taking a really wide body posture or holding a pen in your teeth for a few minutes so that you're simulating a smile, I am faking that happiness. Yes, I am making it myself. But the emotions I feel are 100% real because what we do with our face and body affects the chemistry in our brain. And yes, we are working to construct this happiness, but that happiness is real even though it is person made.
Mm-hmm.
And that happiness, I do not advocate people faking happiness on a regular basis. I prefer to be genuine and authentic. But let's say you had a super important presentation coming up at work, and you really needed to be focused and top of your game and high energy for that presentation. Let's say that 100 other people were going to benefit if you were successful in this presentation. In that situation, I think it'd be entirely appropriate to totally fake it, to put a huge smile on your face and walk with a spring in your step and power pose and go into that presentation feeling good. Part of the viciousness of depression is you want to do less that will help you. You don't feel like exercising when you're depressed. You don't feel like eating fruits and vegetables. You don't feel like social contact when all of these, or meditating, when all of these things are going to make you be happier, right? So what do? I think you're onto something there, Lele. If you fake being happy enough to make better choices, that's great.
Scott, what about the correlation between happiness and mindfulness?
So improved physical health, mental health, improved self-awareness, improved self-control, improved ability to focus, improved quality of relationships, and improved happiness. And I swear it's just the short version of the list. Basically, if you take my half-day workshop and boil it down to a sentence, what does science tell us about happiness? The most important thing is to have good relationships with other people. There's a lot more to it than that, but if you had to pick one thing, it's have good, high-quality relationships with other people. What's a key way of having better relationships with other people? Meditating, becoming more aware of your own stuff, and in particular, the kind of mindfulness that I'm sure you two and many of your listeners are aware of, the kind of meditation called loving kindness meditation, where you're specifically trying to nurture feelings of affection and caring for other people and yourself. Being self-focused is not a good way to be happy. And yet, caring about yourself, being good to yourself, loving yourself, being kind to yourself is a good way to have good relationships and have other people to be focused on. So again, it's one of these paradoxes. Mindfulness adds neurons to your prefrontal cortex, this most valuable bit of uniquely human brain real estate that we have right behind our foreheads, loosely speaking, responsible for executive functions, right? Focusing attention, initiating appropriate action, making decisions, inhibiting inappropriate action. So if anyone listening has ever started an email to your boss that says, "Dear total moron," and not sent it, you have your prefrontal cortex to thank. It is awesome brain real estate, and we wish that ourselves and our colleagues would operate more often out of that prefrontal cortex.
Where would you start? Like if somebody doesn't feel happy and is watching this podcast?
Start with where you're inclined to start, right? What science can tell us is what works for most people most of the time. But any single person listening to this, you're not an average. You're a person with a unique brain. Those 86 billion neurons between your ears are wired differently than any other brain in the universe. So experiment with your own life. But if somebody still wants suggestions from me, I say start with relationships. For most of us, most of the time, investing in the quality of our relationships is an investment for happiness for us and a person that we're relating with. Eat right, sleep right, get some exercise, connect with other human beings in a caring way, and you're well on your way to choosing more happiness in your life.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's really, really a pleasure to have you with us today.
If other people have questions for me, they can contact me through my site, happybrainscience.com. Namaste. Thanks for having me.